pretty quickly through this one because I think you can very easily understand and read this one on your own. I forgot my clicker. But then we're going to get into the goods, and basically we're going to be done with the semester so soon. Y'all feeling that morning stress? When I walked in, I asked, the guy at the front desk, like, hey, how's it going? He's like, tired. I'm like, you're the front desk person. It's your job to be friendly and awake. I just think it's like, everyone's so close to the end of the semester. It's a struggle. Don't look to drugs. Other coping can work for you too. Okay. Well, we left off on the psychological treatments for individuals who have a difficulty with alcohol. The big one. Who wants to guess it? Everyone's heard of it. Therapy. Yes, but specifically for alcoholics. AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you, Caroline, and everyone who piped up. Exactly. However, despite the fact that it is definitely the most popular and the most widely used for those who seek treatment, their recidivism rates, like their likelihood of people who go back into alcoholic tendencies, are quite high. They're only hitting around like a 10 to 15% success rate for people who give up alcohol and stay off alcohol for the rest of their lives. Unfortunately, they just go through the cycle of maybe getting back into getting back into AA, maybe getting a sponsor, but unfortunately, most people fall off. And that is why a lot of different types of interventions are moving in at this time that's more accepting of the natural process, that it's really hard, for any of these drugs that we're going to be talking about today, to go off it cold turkey. That it is a natural process, people are finding in research more recently, that, you take maybe a deep dive as far as the initial interest in getting off any of these, and maybe you go cold turkey for a little bit, but because of the nature of addiction and just because of the nature of life, how readily available alcohol is, how stressful people's lives are, how used to they are of using alcohol as a coping skill, it is that they are to grab another drink. So they're trying to have a more accepting focus when we're looking at the environmental interventions and the cognitive behavioral therapy interventions, that, you're not going to be jumping into that black and white thinking of like, I'm a terrible person, I used alcohol again, I failed the program again, I can't do it. Is that making sense? That's kind of the thinking that a lot of the STEP programs use, of like, once you're a pickle, you're always a pickle. Has anyone heard that? So like, you start out as a cucumber, and then you're in the pickling grind, can't go back to being a cucumber. So they say to you, once you're a pickle, you're always a pickle. Well, that's really like a very negative way of looking at this, because when you get into that, it's hard to move someone out of that thinking and wanting to try again. Like, if they just continue to fail and continue to think they're always going to be a pickle, they're always going to be an alcoholic, it's not very motivating for them to try again to have less. So with the more environmental interventions of the halfway houses, it's more support, it's more people who are working towards a common goal, maybe more accepting of the bumps in the road that are natural when someone is trying to get off alcohol. And then also with the behavioral and cognitive behavior techniques, of course, it's talk therapy based, trying to insert logical thinking, trying to understand also what are those thoughts that an individual is having about themselves, about their environments, about their needs, that is making it for them that they feel like it's absolutely necessary that they take a drink. So again, just trying to maybe enhance people's self-control, enhance people's ability of self-awareness. And then also, maybe giving themselves a little more grace and a little more forgiveness if they, aren't perfect on that journey towards not being so addicted. Yes, Jana.
One of the patients that we see at the office and stuff like that, this patient, she was an alcoholic and she was also a drug abuser and stuff like that. And also, like, what she has told us that the group therapy really does work. Like, that's something that she has to maintain herself. But also, like, working out has really motivated her and encourage her, like, every single time. Like, hey, you looking better. Hey, come on, then you can do it.
Oh, that's so nice.
Like she's like, that's some way to detox my whole body and to be able to feel better about my own self.
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. It seems like she's just getting into a healthier lifestyle in general, and a lot of times with that, you start making some good choices. There's like a trickle over effect. Okay. All right. Thanks for sharing that. So, like I mentioned before, a lot of approaches, and AA especially, you get into this like feedback loop of trying to control, hitting a bump in a road, trying to move towards abstinence, finding that it's incredibly challenging to do a full abstinence-only program, as in there's a lot of failures, and it makes people feel like they want to just give up. So again, just be aware of that cycle, unfortunately. Like I mentioned, when you're using more AA approaches that are not inpatient or not as intensive as what I'm going to talk about now, you do see a lot more relapse. Like I said, recidivism's around quite high, and then that success rate of absolutely alcohol-free the rest of life is only around 10 to 15%. But they do have different options that are much more inpatient, much more intensive in nature. A lot of times these cost a lot of money, so there's definitely an access to care issue with these types of programs. The more hardcore, treatments facilities where they potentially have medication that can help individuals while they are detoxing, while they have, all-day intensive treatments of combinations of group, family, and individual therapy. We are seeing that when that combination is used, we are getting at much higher success rates, even ranging upwards of 70 to 90% as far as success rates. So there is a really big difference depending on the type of treatment. But again, like I mentioned, sometimes there's an access to care issue. Sometimes insurance plans do not want to pay for that, especially since AA is free. But more so, what I like to think of AA could be a relapse prevention program, that once someone is outside into the world after they've experienced, that more intensive in-treatment facility, that's actually where AA works really well, to upkeep the treatment, to upkeep that support, to have that group therapy even after they're done with that treatment. So that's really where it, I would say, works best. And yeah. So now moving into more psychoactive drugs, narcotics, sedatives, stimulants, anti-anxiety drugs, pain medications, hallucinogens. We're going to be going over lots of these. We do see that psychoactive medications are definitely most commonly associated with abuse, and that is why if you have ever been given, maybe not a narcotic, but a sedative, a stimulant, anti-anxiety, pain medications, that's probably why your doctor is so careful, or should be so careful about the dosages that he or she is giving you, and also just keeping in touch with you as you are using medications. So the first one we're going to talk about, the group of drugs, are the opium, the opioids, and its derivatives. So we have morphine, heroin, and codeine. Codeine, I think y'all have, I've at least been giving codeine. That one's pretty common for pain. But these drugs were originally praised for their medical uses, but then we slowly but surely found how incredibly addictive and dangerous they could be. The immediate effects of, morphine and heroin are that you have a complete alleviation of pain. Like, people describe it as this warm, amazing feeling that washes over their body, that they immediately feel like nothing bad can happen to them in the world. It's just like nirvana. I'm not trying to sway you to have this drug just by describing it. I realized I was like, boy, I'm really positively showing what it feels. But then, there's euphoric spasms that you can think of as maybe orgasmic, alleviation of anxiety, relaxation. It's just incredibly good feeling. So that is why, people get addicted to it. It feels really, really good in that first few moments. But as you all hopefully know, and that is why, you don't just take these medications, is that there are negative long-term effects. People do experience withdrawals when their symptoms have ceased and they stop taking this medication. There's a lot of times there's cravings, there's withdrawal symptoms of not taking the drug. They're at a much higher risk for experiencing addictive behaviors, because the more you take it, the more likely it is actually that you will become addicted to it. Also, what's challenging is that when you first have it, you can have a smaller dosage. And this is, even when a doctor is giving it to you. But as you are given maybe more and more of this, you need more and more of these drugs to experience the positive effects and the pain relieving effects, because the tolerance that you will grow when taking these grows pretty quickly, your tolerance levels. So it's very, very important that these medications are only given when they are used legally in hospital settings through IV drips at very slow rates, and hopefully very monitored, unless you're getting them on the street, which obviously then it's not being monitored and it gets very, very dangerous. Any questions on this? No? All right, I'm not going to ask anyone if anyone's tried morphine, but if you've had surgery or something incredibly painful, All right, let's watch this video. Oops. Oh, shoot. No.
Alicia will tell you that they agreed to let us follow them as they went about their nightly needle routine. We did this from a documentary standpoint. We don't comment, we don't encourage, we don't discourage, we don't intervene, we don't stop, we don't start, we don't follow. Within 22 minutes of meeting up, the twins shot up 4 times. They look.
I'll be back. I'm getting water. Dying right now. All day. Okay. Follow you. I always go after her. She's spoiled. It's always messy. I don't like how it's messy.
I'm able to hit myself right away, always. I just get right into this one.
We're not at the same time.
5 minutes ago, I felt really sick and uncomfortable. My legs hurt. And you can walk look at it. Now I'm like happy to be next to her. The first time we ever got high was together. We did a 30 oxycodone 30 milligrams. We had a friend who offered it to us, and we did it at the exact same time. But I took off faster. I was addicted to it. I started using the needle after her. She convinced me to do it. I talked her into it. And then from there on, I just never stopped. I keep going until I get more and more high to the point where I can't take it. And I like bumps in my hand from doing all day. Because I'll pop it up right now. I always miss a little bit in my hands, and my hands are all messed up. I'll sit here and call people back for all day. And it makes me sick. I get so high, I get sick. And I puke all day. They're so dirty. It's not sterile. It's disgusting. This is where I start getting hot and sweaty. My hand is hurting really bad. This is like the typical life. I can just sit on the couch all night. We're always waiting for the next shot. And pretty much nothing can stop us from getting high ever. I'm more aggressive with it. I'll shoot it anywhere. I'll shoot it in my feet. My friend died of a heroin overdose. I did it in the bathroom of his wake. You do it anywhere. I'm addicted to the needle. I love the needle. I love the way it hurts. I love everything about it. I never want to stop. These 2 needles are literally like my children. Like if I lose one of them, I go crazy. I'm really, really, really high right now. So it's like not even the fact that we need more. It's like all in your head that like if you don't get it, you're gonna die.
Alrighty. Yeah, so this is what it looks like. I think a lot of people. What?
Dr. Bill.
Yeah, he's a UNT alum.
He is a UNT alum from my program, actually, counseling psychology. Yeah, but his license was taken away. Yeah, did y'all know that? I mean, you can't take away someone's PhD, so you can always call them doctor, you know. But
So
you
his
can.
show's still good.
You can what?
I said so his show title's still good.
Show title is still good. Why did he lose his license? I think he didn't do the CE credits too often, or didn't pay something. It wasn't actually because of the way he was being on air. It was just something dumb. And then he was like, well, I have these people do so many releases that I don't even need a license to do what I'm doing. So anyway, but he does actually give a lot of money to the UNT psychology program.
Thanks, Dr. Phil.
Thanks, Dr. Bell. All right, so yes.
What was that?
When was that?
Yeah, do you know?
Oh, I just look up random YouTubes. What does it look like? Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, but that is what it really looks like. You get so addicted. You're not thinking clearly, obviously. It's incredibly painful. And a lot of, I thought what was striking is how often they commented on how disgusting they were. Because a lot of times I think people who have these addictions don't have that insight. But I did think that was quite interesting, maybe because they were, being videotaped, but they were kind of commenting on that.
Is that, I'm sorry, is that your opinion about how they did not know how discussing your opinion?
Yeah, that's my clinical opinion from what I've seen. I would say I'm not pulling that from the research. That's just me. Yeah. But I mean, when you're talking to someone, they often try to downplay it. I think that's what you see more of, not talking about oh, I'm so gross how I use the same needles and these are my babies and look how gross my hands are. It's more trying to hide it, is the behavior I think I see more, at least. So that's why I say that. Anyway, like we just saw, obviously incredibly maladaptive behaviors, incredibly dangerous behaviors, as we also saw that tendency to isolate, to not do anything during the day. We can see that as antisocial, as well as some people who, commit crimes to get these narcotics, to get these types of drugs. They can easily hurt others as they are engaging in these drugs, or they are willing to hurt others to get the drugs. And that would all be antisocial. What we also see is that there's a very high incidence rate of the antisocial personality disorder within heroin addicts specifically. And we also see that there is like an entire subculture of narcotic usage, that a lot of times they can relate to each other, they have similar personal characteristics, personal histories, and they find that they kind of all feed off of each other, talk about their highs, talk about where they're getting, different drugs or needles or access to whatever they need to get the high. So they kind of work together, and it's a bit of a subculture. Obviously, these are like all of the reasons, and I'm sure you could think of even more of why someone would get addicted to any of these opiates. 81% of addicts cite pleasure as the main reason for beginning, which again, unfortunately, if y'all have heard of the opioid epidemic that is happening now, it started with most of those cases started by getting a prescription from a medical professional for a legitimate reason of experiencing pain, whatever the cause was. For a lot of people, unfortunately, it was veterans coming back with serious injuries that really needed these pain medications. And unfortunately, it grew from there, again, into that kind of subculture of many people, finding each other who have similar addictions, and then growing from there. But what a lot of other people note is the curiosity of just knowing what it feels like because they've heard it feels so good. Peer pressure, stress relief, personal maladjustment, and then those sociocultural conditions, especially in the Northeast, is where the opioid epidemic is worst right now. It is, of course, more likely for you to have access to these drugs just if you're near it, if you know what's happening in your neighborhood. It's more likely that you could succumb to this curiosity and this pleasure-seeking behavior. Yes.
My hometown in New York is number 2 in the country for opioid.
Oh boy.
You know why specifically the Northeast? Is there a reason?
I don't. Do you know? I don't know why specifically. I just know that is the case. That the cluster is happening a lot more in that area of the country. I don't know why. A lot of times, like I said, it's like, it starts with some groups and they create those cultures and those subcultures, and there's a lot of people in condensed area, small town, and then people know each other, and then there's that curiosity. Alyssa with then, yeah, sure. Yeah.
From one of my other professors said one
Mm-hmm.
reason why it's more flush up in that area is more of the people that work construction and all that are getting injured more often.
Oh.
That they
Interesting.
Put on Norco and whatnot, and
Uh-huh.
they slowly grow from there.
Interesting, because there's more construction in a more condensed area. There's more injuries. They get a medication that's prescribed to them, and then it grows from there. Interesting. Okay, that's definitely a good reason. Well, not a good reason, but a reason that makes sense, I should say. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, Samantha.
There's actually been like a cutback on how much has been like allowed to be prescribed.
Oh, yeah.
Which actually has a lot of issues for those who actually need it.
Mm-hmm.
My father has like lupus and
Mhm.
internet back. And because of that, they like cutting down his pain.
Mm.
He has like fentanyl patches. So with that, he's having to go through withdrawals even though he medically needs it.
Wow.
Because like,
Doctors are so scared.
well, they have to. It's like a legal thing. It's cutting back on it
Really?
to try to lower the dependencies that other people are getting.
Wow.
but it actually affects those
People who really need it. Yeah.
which sucks.
That does suck. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's, so many people who get addicted. They, make these sweeping adjustments, and yeah, that's really sad. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Any other questions on this? Okay. We had a good pause, so might as well. So this is what the opioids actually do. What the those who use heroin experience is that it's highly connected to the feeling of a big rush of endorphins. And what the heroin does is that it replaces natural endorphins with the heroin, and they get that rush of pleasure. It's also connected to potentially dopamine, and that it is a dysfunction in the reward pathway, in that it gets utilized so often of like reward, that the brain kind of just gets like a little confused, I would say, and that reward pathway gets stimulated too much by this type of drug that they get addicted, and then the only way that they can experience that need is by having the drug again and stimulating that reward pathway. And then there's the reward deficiency syndrome, which is a different theory than the dopamine theory of addiction, which that is like a genetic deviation, is that like a number of people are more genetically predisposed to have addictive behaviors, and that we do know from the research, but that because they have that genetic predisposition, they are more likely to need these types of drugs to have that similar reward effect that we do. That like they don't get the same feeling of rewards based off of whatever genetic differences that they have. So they just need more and more and more, and they like need to flush their system with drugs to get that similar feeling. And that's why they then, because they're using more, are going to become more addicted. It heightens their risk is another way of saying that, a simpler way of saying that. Again, like I mentioned, high rates of do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, tell me this if this is too off topic, but I heard that like people with ADHD, it's thought like one possible cause is like a dopamine receptor difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so that could be why they tend to have a tendency more towards addiction. Or it could be the impulsivity.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. Unfortunately, we do also see high comorbidity rates for individuals with ADHD for abusing those medications. I've also heard that. I've seen it in the research. That's definitely true. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for participating. I don't know if I've been so good at writing people's check marks today.
I talk too much, though, it's okay.
No. No one talks too much. I wish y'all would talk more. I was just making sure I got y'all. Okay, so like I mentioned, comorbidity rates are very, very high. Also, as I mentioned, I think a lot of times people are taking drugs as a way to cope with their lives. Happy people don't end up taking a lot of these drugs most of the time. I think it really stems from trauma. It really stems from environmental negative factors that they're trying to cope as best as they can with, what's going on in their head and what's going on in their heart. So 50% have other forms of substance abuse, 36% have that trauma, and we're seeing very high rates of depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. Similar to alcohol addiction, treatment is often very rough going, a very painful process. A lot of times, again, people get in the cycle of getting off, any of these drugs. They, go cold turkey, and then the drug, the addiction, the culture that they go back into, the family that they go back into, the town that they live in draws them back in. So again, it's initially very similar to that for alcohol addiction, and that they're just cycling around over and over again, unfortunately. But what we do see is that when used in conjunction with methadone and Does anyone know how to say this properly? Buprenorphine. All right, well, it's on all right, well, let's look at them oh, I thought it was the next one. Sorry, the next slide. Those are medications that can assist in the addiction process and those withdrawal symptoms, and allowing people to have some like of the edge taken off. Not to say that it's not completely taken away, definitely not completely taken away, but some of the edge is taken off with those medications, and definitely helps with rates of recidivism, getting back into it when people don't want to. Okay, so now talking about stimulants. This is the one I think is more commonly thought of for people with ADHD, but your thought was totally right about all of them. You can be thinking of that as the cocaine and the amphetamines. And what you have, as you mentioned, as you maybe thought of or heard of from ADHD medication, this is why it's potentially sometimes helpful for people with this disorder, is that it increases feelings of alertness and abilities to concentrate, and that oftentimes you can hyper focus. I don't think concentration is always the best term, because concentration I think we think of as like, we're studying for long periods of time, but more so if you like get off on the wrong task, you can be hyper focused on like washing the whiteboard or whatever it is you get still distracted by. You have to still be vigilant about what you're focusing on and the concentration that you want to be having. But it does also increase confidence, and it also helps people with their impulse control issues sometimes. It also decreases feelings of fatigue. It increases a lot of times people's not intrinsic motivation, but it like looks like it because they're able to stay on a task for much longer, I guess I'll say. So that's also kind of like focus. So first looking at cocaine, it's a plant-based product, usually ingested by sniffing, swallowing, or injecting. Also has similar euphoric state experiences when used. A lot of times you get very addicted to this very quickly as well. It can have hallucinogenic effects. Very, very dangerous. What this does is it blocks the presynaptic dopamine transmitter, and with that, you get that euphoric state. But then once you have started using this, you kind of need it to have any type of happy feelings at all. And that's also why people get so addicted, because they're missing it so much, and those lows that they maybe had before they started taking cocaine are even lower now and more painful to them now, because they've experienced this increased availability of dopamine by blocking the presynaptic dopamine transporter. So it's just that process of addiction that happens. With long-term amphetamine use, very, very dangerous brain damage, psychopathology, long-term negative effects. Treatment, again, we're using that methadone, but also potentially naltrexone. Psychological interventions are pretty effective, again, because it's probably stemming from pain that was pre-existing, that they had, psychological difficulties before that led them to this drug. Again, having people to just jump into cocaine. Again, with the cocaine treatment, as far as the CBT that is used, the cognitive behavioral treatments that are used, working towards a conditioning perspective in that you're trying to create contingency plans. Okay, how long would you go without using it for now? What reward can we put in place for you once you make that, small step to not using whatever it is, a few hours a day maybe, and then slowly but surely, positively pairing different elements that you can use to try to replace cocaine usage. What we can also have, of course, is, intensive in-treatment facilities. Oftentimes, those are the best way to go about this, especially with withdrawals, symptoms that can be very dangerous and can kill people on their own. If they're throwing up, they can choke. There's lots of dangerous things that can happen. They can black out from the pain, whatever it is. Dangerous things can happen even when people are not on the drug of their choice. And what we see is that it's equally range and effective. There's a very effective treatments for those who are mandated, who have to go in for these treatments. Psychological treatments for cocaine dependence are associated with decreases, not just in cocaine use, but a range of other problems. Again, kind of talking to the fact that there's so many comorbidities for individuals who are abusing drugs. I know I'm going through this a little quickly, but I don't think this is the toughest information to get for y'all. What you see with amphetamine usage, weight loss is pretty common. It's the wonder pills. That's why they're so readily available. You've probably gone to just the library at UNT and potentially had the chance to buy these from someone for $20 a pill. It's a huge problem. This is a Schedule II drug. Y'all are laughing because it's true. It is. It's everywhere. It's not just UNT. It's every university. The more rigorous the university, actually, the more likely it is that they're going to be there. It is a Schedule II drug, which just means that there's a high incidence rate of the potential for abuse and the potential for wanting to sell it and use it illegally. So that's why, again, doctors have to be pretty careful, or they should be pretty careful. I don't think they're so careful with amphetamines, or at least not as they should be, because, there can be some very severe psychological or physical dependence issues that people can experience, especially when being abused. There's, the potential for brain damage, heart damage, amphetamine psychosis, hazardous fatigue, psychologically and physically addictive, so you have to be really careful. There will also be withdrawal, and what we see a lot of times with that withdrawal is GI, like just your intestinal tract problems. Personality deterioration is like they feel much slower, they feel very lethargic, and with that it kind of makes sense to have some feelings of depression. If you felt like you were kind of on this high, on this speed, this ability to focus and do anything, and then you're back down, you're going to feel depressed. So that's something to keep track of. With methamphetamine, again, it's a highly addictive stimulant drug, increases the level of dopamine in the brain. This is known as the corpuscle cocaine. Here, got a video on this one too. Yes.
I actually work with somebody who's like always on amphetamines, and like
Really?
1 week that she didn't have them, she was a completely different person. She was like, I can't talk to anybody like when I'm not on them, and like was
Wow.
quiet and like literally just a different person. And I was like, oh my god. Like she was like, I can't hang out with like my boyfriend's family. I can't like talk. And I
Wow.
was like, are you serious? And she was like,
She really maybe experiences that down, that
Yeah.
depression. Wow. Thanks for sharing, Melissa, with the why. Look how beautiful she was.
These are like before doctors.
This is what meth does. You don't have to watch this whole thing, but some of these in here are pretty shocking. It's a lot of weight. You don't eat as much. Yeah. A lot of physical effects. Sores. I know. Okay, y'all get the picture. Tons of physical effects. Yeah, it's really terrible. With prolonged use, obviously the physical effects get worse and worse and worse. There's structural changes in the brain that happen, not only with the dependency, but also just straight up brain damage. It's very resistant to treatment. Relapse is very, very common. It's highly addictive, again, because of, the structural changes that are happening in people's brains. It is formed around the need for meth. We have seen a substantial increase in the last 10 years. I don't know specifically why. Does anyone know why specifically meth has seen that substantial increase? I haven't heard of that one specifically, why it would be, but yeah, very, very dangerous. Don't do it. Okay, so now looking at stimulants, caffeine and nicotine. This one I think is, yes, Courtney.
I'm sorry, going back
Go for it.
to meth. So what's the best form of treatment? So like I have a
Intensive
coworker that
inpatient.
used to be addicted to
Mhm.
like he confided in me, I guess. Well, not confided, he told everybody actually. But yeah, no. But
Interesting
like, he was
dude.
saying, like he lives in like a group home and like that's kind of like
Oh,
what
that's
helped
good.
him.
Okay.
So like is that like something that
So intensive in treatment is incredibly necessary for a drug like this, but a lot of times people get arrested before they can get treatment.
yeah,
That happens. Yeah, you're much more likely to do dangerous things with yourself, with others that are criminal activity. You're probably going to be found by the cops. Obviously, these are incredibly illegal. I don't know if that goes without saying. These are illegal. So unfortunately, a lot of them get like thrown into jail. Well, they go cold turkey, but then a lot of times it kind of just depends on the jail and the system that they're in, whether or not they're getting any support in jail, as in mental health support. Some people can, I think, maybe those who are more privileged or have money can, get out of jail time to go into an intensive inpatient treatment center for drugs. But it really depends who gets in and who doesn't. And then, similarly, like you have to have a drop down. Like once you have intensive inpatient treatment, you don't want to just like throw them out. Like just be like, okay, good luck, have fun. It was nice seeing you for 3 months, back onto the streets. Like within that week, if that is the case, people get right back into the same drugs. And then actually it's the most dangerous. Got me on a tangent, but it's good information. It's actually the most dangerous time is the week after in treatment because they think that they're like, I don't know if it's like a conscious thing, but like during that time, their tolerance goes down. So it's much more likely for them to overdose, like just, going back on the same amount of the drug, or even if they do have the thought of like, oh, I'll have a little less, like it's just still more likely that they're going to die from an overdose in that week after. So it is important to have those halfway houses to like have those step down programs. But again, a lot of people don't have access to that.
Yeah, I think it's like extremely expensive for like.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, maybe until the
Extremely.
tens of thousands of dollars.
Oh,
for,
yeah.
like, a month or something.
Oh yeah. 100%. I mean, think about it. Like you got to have psychiatrists, you have medical professionals, you have to have nurses, you have to have people who are on watch all the time. You have to have people who are doing all the, just supportive group work. Even for people who are undergrad, sometimes they have them in there, but you have to pay for that. Then you have to have the housing itself. Then you have to have the food. Like all of those things, it's like so expensive. You're right. Tens of thousands it can be. Yes.
She was mentioning the house.
Mhm.
My friend, I guess friend, whatever he is.
Person,
He went to like a treatment center for all that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one like Tiger Woods went to. So
That one was probably a plush.
yeah, it really helps if you have the money for it because now he's like in the halfway house. It's like really structured. Like they have bedtimes. You have to go to the gym. You have to have a personal therapist.
Yeah.
And it just really helps with the structure.
His parents are able to pay for that. Yeah. It helps to have money when you got problems. But that's good that your person is getting help. Both of you. I'm glad. Some people get help, so that's good. You got to hold on to those cases, I think. Did I see another hand? Yes,
Oh.
Sarah.
I was just gonna, I don't know,
how much truth goes to this, but I used to work on the square at like a bar,
Mhm.
and we had a lot of people that would like, sit outside and sleep there late at night when we left. And one of them was, like we'd let them in and stuff for meals, and he would tell me about like how Denton is like one of the biggest methamphetamine towns in the DFW area.
Oh my God, I didn't even know that.
I don't know if that's
Really?
true, but he said all the homeless population.
There's a lot of headlights behind you.
Can agree that like he said
A lot of
especially
meth.
in the homeless population, like you go to the soup kitchens and
Wow.
shelters, he said like everyone like who's has normally a drug problem is normally meth. That's what he was telling me. I don't know if that's any truth to
I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of head nods. So at least other people have heard it. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. I don't know. Go donate money to the soup kitchens, I guess. Yes. Will you remind me of your name? Sorry.
Damien,
Damien. Thank you.
I used to work at the PT off of Fort Worth and Eagle by the
Uh-huh.
cemetery. And like a bunch of meth homeless people would be trying to hang out in front of the store, like asking people for money. It
Wow.
was like the everyday thing. It's pretty scary. Some of them were like violent.
Really scary. Yeah, that's why they get in jail usually is the first step to getting help.
Yeah. So there was like
Yeah.
always a cop like coming up to the store like every 30 minutes, just like
Really.
yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I use that QT pretty regularly.
It's a good one.
It's a good QT. But I think I go in the middle of the day, so it's
Yeah,
like
that's
less
probably-
likely for me to
Yeah,
see
it's
it.
probably like,
Now I know not to go then. What?
I went in the morning to that same QT and there was a lady like yelling at herself like outside,
Yeah.
like stomping her feet.
Yeah, that's psychosis.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so sad. You're making me not want to go to that QT. Okay. All right. Thanks for sharing, y'all. And Amanda. All righty. Laughing at other people's misfortune. The best kind of laughter. Okay. Let's talk about caffeine. Bring it back in. What we all know and love. That I'm drinking right now, and I see many of you drinking right now. Yes, extremely addictive. So this idea of like caffeine addiction, I think, is a bit decisive in the psychological community because of obvious reasons. Like perfectly healthy, well-functioning people use it every day to get on with their lives and be even more successful in their lives. They feel like it's absolutely necessary for them to go about the day. But what I'm describing right now are all characteristics of addiction. So, tough conversations to have. Yes, Maria. Caffeine withdrawal is, yeah. I mean, it is in there, but I just think that like no one's ever going to give the diagnosis. Like I myself, I realized I was like so incredible. I was having like 4 or 5 cups a day. I know it's a lot. Welcome to graduate school. And like I 100% went through withdrawals. I did it. I knew I would. I did it on purpose over Thanksgiving break. I had like a week that year, and it was a tough week. Yes.
Yeah, like I work at Starbucks, so I can really tell the difference between the before and after. There's this lady who comes in and she gets her iced coffee with shots, and before coffee, she's always in a bad mood, talking to everybody. Drinks it, comes back later for another of the same thing. She's like in a happy mood. She's like, oh, I'm getting things done.
Right.
I'm
Looking
ready to kill the
behaviorally,
day.
it looks the same, right? It looks
Yeah.
the same.
Like if we make her drink wrong the first time, she'll get mad at you. But if we make it after she's had like her cup of coffee, it's like it's okay, it happens to everybody. And it's like,
I can relate. Yeah, 100%, 100%. And behaviorally, so I know. And behaviorally looks the same as these other drugs, right? That are addictive, that we have criminalized. So very interesting. Very easily abused, very readily available. I mean, also nicotine. That I think we have a lot more warnings for how dangerous it can be. Obviously, it's on the front of every cigarette pack. But, both are very difficult to quit. There's withdrawal symptoms for both, health problems and side effects for both. Like, I think we think of caffeine as healthy-ish, but like it wreaks havoc on your GI system. And like, try going a week without it and you will recognize what it was doing to your body. Okay, so enough on that. I should note, sorry, what we call it as far as the DSM goes for nicotine, it's nicotine dependence syndrome. And I guess that's important to know. And the rest I forgot. Okay. So, sedatives. Also something that a lot of people really, really need, and are often given by medical professionals to individuals who are incredibly anxious, who need a sedative because they're having surgery, need a sedative because, well, they're about to have surgery, need to, stop whatever allergic reaction they're having. This is also used sometimes with that in conjunction with those shots. Use it together sometimes. Lots of reasons that people need sedatives. So again, one's widely used even just to induce sleep. But these can also be very lethal, can also be very dangerous, can also lead to psychological dependence, can also be very easily abused. And it is unfortunately very lethal when used in overdose because it just slows down your central nervous system. And they can slow it so much that your heart stops. So very, very dangerous. And again, hopefully medical professionals are giving these drugs cautiously. Treatments really is kind of dependent on the type of person who is using it and how they are using it and how they are getting addicted to it. For those who are like highly dependent, they tend to be around middle age and they tend to start using it for just sleep problems, like instead of, melatonin, maybe the melatonin didn't work, their doctor bumps them up a little bit, and then it can be highly addictive. Withdrawal is, again, also a really big issue, especially if they're using it for sleep. People really, really need their sleep for, going about their day, and then also for using that willpower to not take the medication. But if the medication was what was allowing them to sleep, they're going to have a really hard time with this. So treatment is pretty complicated and difficult. Barbiturates in general, the withdrawal, can be quite severe, very long lasting, anxious, apprehensive, tremors, insomnia, weakness, just a whole onslaught, elevated blood pressure, especially since, you were just so chill and now it's like off and you're like going kind of crazy. Loss of weight, withdrawal can last as long as a month, and that's quite a long time for withdrawal symptoms. Like usually these other ones, if you're going cold turkey, especially if you're using methadone in conjunction with your withdrawal symptoms, you're hoping for, about a 2-week process max, I would say, for those like intense withdrawal symptoms. But with barbiturates, it tends to last longer. So it can, again, be very dangerous and shouldn't do that on your own, I would say. Like, hopefully you can try to gain some access to some healthcare that medical professionals can help you with that process. Okay, hallucinogens. Anyone else think of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds? No, that's not. Okay, we've got LSD, mescaline, psilocybins, and ecstasy. Let's do it. I know, at least I said those right. Okay, we've got LSD. This, honestly, is what you think of as like we're starting off with the heavy stuff. So it's that change in that sensory experience and that perception of the world. You can see like literally stars. It can be very pleasurable, if you're like feeling it, but it can also be very terrifying in that, sometimes the hallucinogenic effects can be really scary for people, feel like they're gonna die, feel like, the world is coming to an end. They can flash back to some like later point in life, as in like they miss like entire periods of their life. Like they just like miss it. Like that part of their memory is like gone, and they like come out of this trance or whatever, and they're like, I don't even know where I am or who I am right now. It was part of like wave culture. It's very maybe not as much as ecstasy now, but like, you know, part of like trance stuff and house music, and like that's where you can find it. And a lot of people, you know, take it and then don't get addicted immediately, and then they think it's like, oh, it's not so dangerous, but it's still incredibly, incredibly dangerous. Okay, so now we've got mescaline and psilocybins. This comes from a peyote cactus, and this is like shrooms, mushrooms. Has similar effects to what LSD will look like. Yes, Janet.
I heard the peyote cactus or whatever, that is actually in a culture. Like, not in a culture, but it's like a belief, like a ritual.
It's religiously affiliated with some cultures. Do you know which culture it is? I don't know.
Like native.
Yeah,
native.
Or
Yes.
South America. We use it as a kind of like a.
They make like tea out of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
either tea or.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Taylor and Sebastian and Janet. Just throwing out the names today. I think I already got you. Okay. Yes, and it has similar effects as what I mentioned. Thank you for sharing that. It's very interesting. Doesn't stop it from being dangerous, though. Okay. Then we have ecstasy. Again, you know, it's a hallucinogen. It's a stimulant. You know, with that stimulant factor as well. It's that like feeling that fast pace, tons of energy. Chemically, it's similar to methamphetamine, but it's that like high, trippy feeling with a lot of energy. Does that make sense?
I always thought it was considered a stimulant,
It's both.
but you hallucinate.
You can also, because you have that like,
Bad
it can create a bad trip, yes, but it's like, it is the combination. Because it's not just a stimulant, because the stimulants don't have that like hallucinogenic trippy effect. I don't have a better word for trippy. Like that like psychedelic experience enhancement effect. Stimulants don't have that. It's more like doing this work or like washing this table. I can do anything, and it's just like hardcore. And this is more like that with the instant enhancement. Yeah. Anyone else want to try explaining it?
I was
Yes.
gonna say, like, is this only just used for pleasure?
Yeah, it's fun.
Just straight up, okay.
Yeah, like stimulants, that's another good one. Like stimulants, like a lot of people, you know, in schools and fast-paced work environments, like they're drawn to these drugs. Ecstasy is not for like working hard. It's for having fun, pleasure. But don't do it. Don't do it. What? Thank you, Brian. Okay, everyone pass. I do not want you to come out of this lecture and be like, oh, that one sounded interesting. No. Okay. Again, it's become quite popular in that like rave culture and dance culture, and it has like a rush and can, you know, have like this like sense of well-being. But then it can also have seriously aversive effects. You could have, like Courtney said, a really bad trip and it isn't even feeling good for you. So it can be like painful, it can be really scary. Also you can be, you know, very much more likely to hurt yourself, to hurt others potentially with, you know, operating large machinery or whatever you're doing. You have to be very, very careful. Yes.
So is this drug like also highly addictive?
Yes. It's not as highly addictive in those like sense of like heroin and cocaine. It's not gonna like hit you so quick. It doesn't work like that. But people definitely can become addicted to this. It just, what?
Is it more like a mental addiction though? Or is it like your body physically gets addicted
Well, it depends. Like people don't. Oftentimes, if they're using ecstasy, chances are they're going to add on another not a medication. Sorry, another drug that's going to be more physically aversive. And then, like, if you're using it that often, you're not just using ecstasy. That's usually what happens. But it does have serious consequences. Like it does affect your brain. It does affect adverse consequences are listed: nausea, sweating, muscle cramps, hallucinations, impulsivity, poor judgment, death. So like we do have that. Definitely. What?
It's like all the advertisements for like Lipitor or something. It's like, you can eat this, but it could cause death, you know.
Exactly. Yes, which is why, don't try it. It is dangerous. It is also used in highly regulated environments with medical professionals, not just on your own. Let me see if I have PTSD, a phobia, psychosomatic disorder, suicidality, depression, drug addiction, relationship difficulties. Again, this is also incredibly small dosages, okay, that they use this for, incredibly small dosages. And they are in an office, like a medical office, where they have, lots of medical things that they can help you if you have some adverse effects. And they just do it like in very titrated amounts to try to medicate some of these difficulties. Yes.
Isn't there MDMA therapy?
Yes. Again, titrated amounts, not for people to try on their own at home. It has to be with medical professionals at their office. They never send it home with people to do it on their own. But yes, there is therapies for this. Yes. And it has been shown very effective. Especially for people with depression. That's a big one that they're doing it right now. Just giving small amounts can seem to be very helpful. But again, don't try it at all. What, Janet? Okay, marijuana. Also a very interesting one. Not legal in Texas, so I'm not endorsing it. But if you go to like Utah, California, Colorado, Washington State, Washington, D.C., lots of places where it's been decriminalized, the conversation will probably look very different. And try it there, not here, because you get arrested here. But it does, increase those feelings of well-being, euphoria, sometimes heightened perceptual activity, relaxation. Again, a lot of people use this to self-medicate for a very wide range of ailments. I've heard it used for diabetes. I've heard it used for cancer. I've heard it used for glaucoma, for Alzheimer's, for what? Seizures, for what's that term? Parkinson's disease, autism. Very widely used. Effective again when used appropriately. Yes. Who else want to add to that one? Any other cool ones you've heard? It is pretty amazing what this can do. Yes,
I
Taylor?
heard about like it being used for like when you're on your period, like for cramps and stuff.
Pain, yeah. That's a big one. Nausea, that one kind of is connected to the cancer thing. Yeah. Or if you have a low appetite, and increase your appetite in a positive way. Ali?
Can't you also have like the reverse effect? Marijuana to like anxiety attack?
Yes. Do not use this for, I didn't list anxiety. Do not use this for anxiety. It makes you paranoid. It worsens it. And so often, this happens all the time. I'm like treating someone for anxiety, and they tell me they're using pot, and I'm like, no, it doesn't help. It doesn't help that situation. Yes.
So I have a friend that like, I'm sure we all have friends in here. No, but she didn't really used to do it, and she started using it, and like it became like a constant thing, and she had like really bad like anxiety, and she was like, well, when I use it, like it like makes me like more aware.
Just oh
And
no.
I'm like I don't think
No, it doesn't.
She's like,
really.
that's why I use it, and I'm like, you're being like super dependent on something
Mhm.
that's not actually helping you.
You can definitely get a dependency on this. Definitely. All right, y'all, let's bring it back, or at least tell me what your comments are. No one wants to tell me. Just side chatter that you didn't prepare. That's cool. Anyway, you can, be in need of treatment for this. Like, I think a lot of people say you can't get addicted to this. That's not true. You can have, those psychological addictions of feeling like you need to have that euphoric buzz or that calmness that sets in that you get used to. Is it going to have, the same withdrawal experiences as the other medications? I keep saying medications. As the other drugs that I've mentioned? No. You're not even going to have that from like the same effects as you do caffeine withdrawal. Caffeine withdrawal is much more painful. But again, you can, lower your effectiveness during the day. You can feel like a dependency to it. You can feel like you're addicted to it. And it can create a lot of problems for you if you're like not getting through school, not getting through work. If you're driving, that's really, really dangerous to do while high. Some people think that they're good drivers while they're high and they're a bunch of liars. So it can put you in some dangerous situations. So it should be used with a lot of caution, I guess I'll say. But we also do see that because you don't usually have that same level of addiction, that psychological treatment methods for those who are maybe trying to treat their own anxiety or treat their own depression with marijuana, these psychological treatments are very effective because you treat that anxiety, you treat that depression, they don't feel like they need to use it as much. Got a little video.
There's only one thing harder than keeping stupid things from happening to people, and that's keeping people from doing stupid things to themselves. Probably heard about bath salts, not the kind for bathing, but the kind that's making people do that crap, crazy stuff all over the place, like climbing on telephone poles and jumping into traffic, or killing your neighbor's goat while wearing lingerie. Those are things that actually happen. The important question is why, and also why. Bath salts are an amphetamine-like drug that got their start in the UK as a club drug, basically a cheap alternative to ecstasy. They've only become a problem in the United States in the past couple of years. In 2011, over 6,100 emergencies involving bath salts were reported by pollution control centers, up from 303 cases in 2010, the year before. Suddenly, emergency rooms all over the country have been seeing people who snorted, or smoked, or injected, or ate something that made them act so psychotic that even large doses of sedatives couldn't calm them down. Some of these people could only be knocked out by general anesthesia. Symptoms included fevers up to 107 degrees Fahrenheit, along with extreme paranoia, dangerously high blood pressure, heart rates, and blood toxicity bordering on kidney failure. These drugs, which have also been marketed as plant fertilizer, incense, and cleaning products, contain a group of synthetic stimulants called substituted cathinones. Cathinone is an organic stimulant found in a plant called khat that's native to the Middle East and East Africa, and it's a dangerous and illegal drug. Most bath salts use one of two main substitutes, methadone or methylene dioxypyrovalerone, which, because of it being really long, is generally just called MDPP. As with drugs like cocaine and meth, these substitutes stimulate the central nervous system while messing with one of our most beloved neurotransmitters, dopamine, the chemical that our brain squirts out to reward us when we do something good for our survival, like eating food or having sex. The more dopamine our neurons get, the better we feel, for a little while at least. But in a person's brain, the synthetic cathinones found in bath salts combine the effects of both cocaine and meth at the same time. On one hand, they block the reabsorption of excess dopamine that's floating around among your neurons, just like coke does. On the other hand, they boost the production of even more dopamine, like meth does. Now, with the brain drowning in dopamine, it becomes so overstimulated, some bath salts highs or hells, as it were, can go on for days, and your brain can't get a break. And if you've ever even gone a day without sleeping, you know how crazy that can make you. So add that to paranoia, panic attacks, mood swings, and you too might start stabbing goats. At this point, the main ingredients of most bath salts have been banned in at least 41 states, But bath salt cookers, just like crystal meth cookers, are trying to get around the law by concocting different but similar chemicals that have the same effect, basically inventing new cathinone substitutes. That means that in addition to destroying people's brains, hearts, and minds, these drug makers are using the users as human guinea pigs for a profit. So seriously, you gotta know that this is not the target audience for these drugs, but don't do drugs, and most especially don't do new drugs that nobody knows what they do, because you never know what's gonna make you, like, go eat your neighbor's dog. Thanks for watching this episode of Science Show.
Okay.
Well,
So I think this hit on a lot of the points that I've been making. But also, don't use the synthetics is the bottom line. That stuff is really dangerous, kind of new. Bath salt, spice, K2 Blaze. Don't do it. Incredibly dangerous. Like, you're putting plastic and nasty stuff in your bodies. Like, if you want to get high, use something natural and use it safely in a state that is legal. Don't try to mimic it because you have no idea what you're going to be taking. Yes, Tyler.
Isn't the guy who like ate that other dude's face, wasn't he on this?
Yeah.
The one in Florida?
Mhm.
Always just
Yeah. Like, I mean, cannibalism, nasty, crazy, crazy stuff. Like, this is not the road you want to go down. Synthetics are bad news. Okay, so finally we've got gambling disorder, also very addictive, in a different way because you're obviously not putting a, foreign entity into your body to increase, dopamine levels. But what you do see is that there's very addictive properties in gambling, and that is because you have, positive reward systems that are intermittent. Like, you never know when the next reward's gonna come. Like, if you're playing slots, it's like, I lost, oh, I lost. And you're always like, I know it's gonna come later. I know it's gonna come later. I know it's gonna come later. And then you win like once, even though you've already lost like $2,000, that like $200 you get back feels so, so good. You're like, well, I gotta keep going. That's what happens with obviously it's like pretty obvious with slots, as in like lose, intermittent rewards, but it's very, very addictive, and very hard to get people off of this as well. Very difficult. We do also see that there are like some personality factors with gamblers. They're like the risk takers of the world, the narcissists of the world. Those who are maybe a little more compulsive, also those who maybe like think very highly of themselves and aren't narcissistic, but think that they, can beat systems in kind of like a conniving way. We see that in a lot of gambling disorders. Unfortunately, we do see this in a lot of ethnic minorities. Native Americans, does that anyone know why? Because it's legal on reservations, and a lot of people go on to reservations, bring it into the reservations. It's always around you, kind of like we were talking about, like that, the cultural factors. Like, you want to get off it, but then everyone around you is there, and the gambling, the slot machine is right next door, right? When it's legal, you can just go into like a gas station, and there can be a slot machine. It's just so hard to get away from it. So yeah. Treatment problems because it's really hard, and because it's so rewarding. Like, that one time you just constantly like trying to prove to yourself, I can do this, I can do this. And you're lying to yourself. And then we've always got these unresolved issues. Big problems with treatment. It's not so effective a lot of times as far as access to care. Approaches that are being evaluated needs a lot more work. And then is the use of methadone and the treatment of heroin, or does it simply exchange one addiction for another? With all of these, you can think that, like, as these step-down approaches, are we just giving them something else to be addicted to? Or are we really getting at the root core of the problem? Probably not. So that is the end of chapter 11. Thank you for bearing with me as I went a little more quickly than I usually do. Let me end this stream. Okay. And now